Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on another episode of Explore Series, a thought leadership initiative by Quadrant Knowledge Solutions. So, it's a series of insightful conversations featuring prominent industry experts engaging in discussion with our experienced analysts. So, these chats will delve into critical topics within the ICT domain, offering valuable perspective and fostering knowledge sharing. So, to introduce myself, I am Riya Tomar, analyst at Quadrant Knowledge Solutions, and I'll be a moderator for today's discussion, which focuses on geopolitical cyber threats, analysis of how geopolitical events and activities are influencing cyber threat landscape and intelligence priorities. So, in the current geopolitical scenario, understanding these influences is crucial for enhancing our threat intelligence and improving our defensive strategies. So, we have our expert today, and I'm excited to delve in this topic within. So to set the stage, I would like to highlight a few recent geopolitical events that have significantly impacted our cyber threat landscape. Ongoing tensions between major world powers, conflict in Eastern Europe, and increased cyber activities attributed to nation states. So these events underscore the importance of robust threat intelligence in anticipating and mitigating risks. Now, let's hear from our expert. Could you please introduce yourself and briefly describe your background in threat intelligence and cybersecurity?
Great. Very nice to talk to you again today. My name is Leon Ward. I'm the Vice President of Product Management at ThreatQuotient. ThreatQuotient is an organization that builds a data analysis platform for security operations and specifically threat intelligence management. So we've got a great view across the dynamic of all of our customers that have got a global deployment that deal with many of the challenges you mentioned, not just the government organizations and critical infrastructure, but also commercial as well. Myself, I've been in cybersecurity and threat intelligence for about 20 years. I one a long time ago practitioner that found I really enjoyed making the products more than actually working inside the operating centers.
Thank you for the introduction. So to start with, I would shoot my first question. That is, how do you see current geopolitical events such as rise in cyber threats amid conflicts in Eastern Europe and Middle East, along with critical elections in countries all over the world impacting the threat landscape? And could you provide specific examples of how changes in threat patterns we should be aware of?
Sure. I'll try and provide one specific example, because yes, as you say, there absolutely is a rise in these challenges, but interestingly enough, we're not all impacted in the same way. For ThreatQuotient, being in the position of building a platform for companies that have to manage and work with cyber threat data, you'd expect a large quantity of our customers and users are from nation states and governments and those who deal with the challenges you mentioned. And we do have them, of course. But interesting enough, the vast majority are actually commercial organizations. And the issues that impact the critical national infrastructure, especially with regards to geopolitical events, frequently have fallout impacts on those further down the food chain or the supply chain, across a whole range of sophistication of organizations. So interestingly enough, the scope is much larger than just those critical infrastructures. Countries have never before been impacted or rather tested by adversaries that have the level of sophistication and resources behind them to go after the targets they're looking after. And we're not seeing any slowdown in that. You mentioned calling out a specific example, and one from fairly recent history that I find fascinating because it really didn't have and doesn't have an easy button to try and mitigate was some of the software supply chain attacks that we're seeing. That specific example I'll talk about was one of XZ or XZ utils just from a couple of months back. I don't want to get pulled into the weeds of attribution of like who was really behind it, but my initial thoughts when I heard about a supply chain attack and malicious software being installed into something called XZ utils, I was like, that doesn't impact me. Like, I've never heard of this compression library. But the reality of it was a library that was part of the software supply chain and was included inside OpenSSH, which is a critical service used by pretty much every organization across the globe across millions of different servers and desktops. Interestingly enough, this was luckily spotted essentially by accident by a security researcher, so the full impact of the attack never really took place. But the fact that the methodology behind it was of such a level of going slow and low to avoid detection was fascinating. So for those who don't really understand how and what took place, this is a supply chain attack in open source software where a specific individual or individuals masking to be one person slowly over a very long period of time built up a relationship with the development team for that software library, and over a period of months and years got so close and became a trusted contributor to that library that then they were able to slowly introduce some malicious code. And because they weren't going after the library itself, they were going after the downstream users of it and the packages and the distributions of Linux and other Unix operating systems that included it. So what's kind of the interesting and easy button solution for dealing with that? Well, there isn't. The best thing organizations can do is to have a really tight control on the software that they use, to have a good understanding of the supply chains associated with it. And likely the companies that are going to be impacted by this the most are those that have the propensity to build their own software. So rather than use off-the-shelf solutions, to have a team that continuously jumps from project to project, building a product and then moving on, building a product for them, moving it on, because you have to manage the whole life cycle of that supply chain. So that's one simple, very specific example of how these geopolitical, highly resourceful and highly funded attackers are able to go after not only nation states, but have the impact of that trickle right down across the world to impact the commercial and other organizations and even systems like that's sitting on my desktop now.
Okay, thank you for the response. And also, I would like to add, like from my perspective, I've noticed a rise in ransomware attacks and state-sponsored cyber attacks, which specially target critical infrastructure and financial institutions. So this seemed to be a direct consequence of geopolitical friction. And given these evolving threats, how should the organization prioritize their threat intelligence efforts? Like what specific aspects should they focus on to stay ahead of these geopolitical-driven threats?
Okay, great question. As I mentioned earlier, the critical national infrastructure and these organizations have never been tested before to the level that they are by these highly funded and sophisticated adversaries. But on the positive side, that does mean the detection and response organizations for those organizations and across all of them have never had more first-hand experience with dealing with these new types of threats and dealing with evolutions of previous ones. That knowledge and that first-hand experience is ideal for sharing. Being able to communicate and collaborate with your peers and other organizations allows that information to become actionable and accessible by others in a way that it perhaps wasn't just a couple of years before. It's great to see this type of information sharing actively taking place in our industry. So I'll provide I'll give a couple of like tips or hints of some things that organizations would do to keep up with and stay ahead of this threat environment. I would say, firstly, search out for communities and get involved in information sharing. The wealth of data and knowledge out there is great, so take advantage of it. The second one is focus on your efforts inside of that information. There is a wealth of information, but there's also a wealth of noise. It's important to be able to focus on what is most important and most relevant for your organization to stand a chance in this like information warfare in terms of the quantity of data. So don't just get data for the sake of having data. Make sure it's focused on the things that you should care about and you should need, and collaborate with your peers to work that out. And the third thing is make the data actionable. Having knowledge about the methods, the tool sets, the techniques, and the processes that are used by the active campaigns, adversaries, malware, ransomware groups that are out there right now is good, but not being able to take advantage and leverage that information, that data, that detection technology, the protections that are available, it just means you're stuck with a data set of just useful but not valuable information. And that's, of course, what products and organizations like ThreatQuotient really bring to the table, and we've focused on for the last 10 years or so, ensuring that threat intelligence information and data can become actionable in an automated or manual way to protect organizations from these latest threats.
Yeah. So since we are talking about collaboration and information sharing, so these, like what I have seen is these have often been mentioned as critical components of effective threat intelligence. So how can organizations overcome these challenges related to trust and data privacy to enhance collaboration?
Trust and data privacy is, of course, two of the most common things that are brought up when we think about information sharing and collaboration. There have been shifts there with the attitudes of organizations, and it's all because information superiority in terms of an adversarial situation requires that the defenders share just as much information as the offenders, like the bad guys, the guys that are behind it. And as you would expect, those who are in the game of building malicious software and going after specific targets are actually very good at sharing their methods, their techniques, and also their tool set for benefits that they have themselves. It's the defenders who have classically got the burden of governance and data controls and compliance that prevent them sharing information that could be of real good use for their peers, should they be able to do that. The ISACs have broken down many barriers to enable this improvement of sharing. And the trusted communities that our customers are part of and have joined have got great rules and standard agreements in place to enable a lot of trusted sharing. I would suggest for any organization that they reach out to any ISAC that's relevant for their organization, and also reach out to and research what is available from a government perspective for regards to geopolitical information. All across the world, there are certs and security teams and cybersecurity centers that provide great actionable information that's specific to that geography. For those that really care about data governance, and everyone does, but certain organizations and verticals really have an extra focus on this. There are tools and architectures that can be defined and built to enable that nice balance between control of the data, protections around the data, and what can be shared. We've worked with a few different organizations to build extremely complex is probably not the right word, robust controls around how information is shared, going from truly air-gap environments into private but internet-connected systems, and then to the more extreme, complete public information sharing communities. And at ThreatQuotient, we even have our own non-customer plus customer community sharing group called the ThreatQ community. It's been growing rapidly over recent months and has a global reach. And for anybody who would like to join, it is an invitation or rather an interview process to join. But if you're involved in this problem space, you're welcome to come and have a look at our community at threatq.com/ThreatQ community, to go there to learn about it a bit some more.
Also, when we talk about threat intelligence, so there have been massive technological advancements. So what role do you see technological advancements like AI and machine learning playing in improving threat intelligence capabilities?
So I think there's some good news and some bad news there. So to start with the good news, so from the threat intelligence communities, AI and ML have got some have got a great future ahead of them. But I'm a firm believer they need to be used very specifically to get their true value from them. You can't use the wrong tool. You can't use the right tool for the wrong. If you use the right tool for the wrong job, you're not going to get a good outcome. We at ThreatQ receive great benefits from our data link engine that provides things like deterministic prioritization and scoring of intelligence specifically to associate with the threat intelligence requirements organizations have to kind of sort through that noise from the important data that I mentioned earlier. And then other tools such as natural language processing, named entity recognition to identify the right hooks and like threads between information that makes it actionable. So there are some great tools out there with prioritization and understanding of data. From the new generative side of things, we've done a whole series of experimentations and integrations with generative AI to help less experienced users get started on their analysis and intelligence journey, and for those who are more experienced to get to the outcomes that they need to get to a little bit faster. And let's flip over to the bad news that I mentioned earlier. So while there are great advances for the defenders and the intelligence analysts with these tools, there are unsurprisingly equal negative advancements for the bad guys. We've seen a proliferation of AI after AI with regards to that are being trained for malicious purposes, especially in the LLM, the large language model side of things. And those tools are enabling less sophisticated adversaries, people who are just trying to begin their journey of becoming the bad guy, being able to allow them to write much more higher quality phishing laws, to generate code that they never could write before, like code AI companions, simplify the generation of software to a level that's never been seen before. And with regards to the outcomes of those malicious authors, they don't have to really worry about the level of quality, testability, maintainability of that code. They're just building a tool that could be a throwaway tool for one specific attack. It's not like you're building an operating system or a data platform or a firewall that has to be robust against attacks. So they can leverage all of those tools in a way that defenders and software developers really can't, because we have to care about and we understand every line of code that goes into all of our products and what the ramifications are, which is some of the things that LLMs and AI models aren't very good at and aren't able to do.
Thanks for the great explanation, Jan. So we've covered a lot of ground today. So to wrap up, I would like you to share one key takeaway for our organizations looking to strengthen their threat intelligence in response to the geopolitical threat landscape.
Sure. I would say my one takeaway echoes something I've said probably 3 or 4 times today already, which is join communities, share information, start to learn, and make that data actionable. A wise man once said, "There's no point in having a mind if you can't change your mind." And you can only change your mind if you get data that tells you there's a reason to change. So as the political situation, as the attack methods change, your defensive needs to change along with it. And they can only do that if you have the data available and if you're able to actually execute or prosecute that change inside your infrastructure, your processes, and your environment quickly across all of your defensive postures. And that's exactly why we've built a data platform like ours to enable that rapid understanding, learning, and response to be achievable by a whole variety of different types of organizations.
Thank you. So to summarize all of this, it's very clear that staying ahead of geopolitical cyber threats requires proactive approach, leveraging advanced technologies and fostering collaboration. as you told. So thank you so much for your valuable insights, and stay tuned for more insightful conversations on Expert Edge. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.